Today's video is for manufacturers of innovative off-site produced building materials. I'm talking about wall panels, prefabricated steel framing, modular units, precast concrete, that kind of thing. A few weeks ago, I released a video talking about how the construction industry is slow to change and how a lot of founders and innovators in this space misinterpret that as a marketing issue. So they try all of these different marketing tactics, hoping that marketing is going to fix that resistance to change. And how behind all of the rational reasons that are provided by either contractors or developers as to why they will not adopt these new building materials, behind all of the, it's going to take a while to learn, maybe it's not going to pass inspection and all of that, behind all of those reasons is actually fear. Fear of losing control, fear of losing a reputation, fear of losing an identity that they have held for many years, the fear of becoming irrelevant. And today I want to take this conversation further, and I want to talk about how if you want your materials to be adopted in this industry, then a mindset reframe needs to be a core part of your messaging. Because yes, we all understand that adoption takes time. However, time also kills businesses. The ATMs that we use today for banking took almost 25 years from the first installation to mainstream acceptance. And let's be honest, most innovators in this space do not have 25 years, let alone the capital investment that is required to maintain the business during that time. And so if you want to accelerate the adoption of your innovative products, if you want more contractors saying yes, then this video is for you. We're going to talk about how you can change that message from a message of making them feel like they're losing a part of them to a message that empowers them. And that is what is actually going to start getting you more sales, is what is going to grow your business predictably and profitably, because your innovation deserves to see the next 25 years, and not just as a story, but as a contribution to the industry, to the landscape, and to the expertise of these craftsmen. Okay, so let's start with this ATM story, because it's going to give us a good reference point for everything we're going to unpack in this video. The first ATMs were installed in the late 60s, and on paper, it sounded like a perfect solution: 24/7 access to cash, no waiting in lines, perfect accuracy. It was a dream. It was a no-brainer. But the technology faced so much resistance, it almost failed. And the strongest resistance didn't come from the customers. The strongest resistance came from the bank's own tellers. And they had perfectly rational concerns. Customers weren't going to like it. They enjoy personal service. They don't want to deal with a machine. What if it made mistakes? What happens then? What about complex transactions? What about the elderly customers? It was going to confuse them. And so the banks responded in a logical way. They provided more training. They showed the accuracy of the machines. They produced specification documents. They ran education campaigns. They put a lot of effort into demonstrating that ATMs were actually the future of banking. However, adoption barely moved. In fact, the resistance intensified. It took bank executives years to realize that they were solving the wrong problem. The tellers were not concerned about the customers. They were not concerned about accuracy of transactions. What they were mainly concerned about, and what kept them up at night, was the loss of control, the loss of their identity, and the loss of power within the system. You see, before ATMs, tellers weren't just money counters. They weren't just bank employees. They held gatekeeping power. They're the ones who interpreted the rules. They're the ones who talked to customers directly. Customers referred to them by name. They're the ones who decided how transactions were going to be carried out and which transactions needed to be done when. And so when the ATM arrived, it shifted that power. It shifted the power from people to machines, to an invisible system. Customers could access money without talking to anyone. The banks could handle a higher volume of transactions without needing tellers. The technology became the new gatekeeper. Another side of this story was control. Tellers held a lot of control. They made exceptions for certain customers. They were able to be flexible in certain situations. They controlled the flow of transactions. They controlled the relationship with the customer. And so when ATMs came along, the rules were coded into the software. There was no more flexibility. There were no more exceptions that the tellers held. There was no more relationship-based service. The technology created this very rigid and transactional kind of tone. The other big aspect was identity. The ATMs threatened the tellers' identities. Who were they if the customers didn't refer to them by name? Who was the face of the bank anymore? Who is the problem solver? Who is the person that the customer trusts with their deepest, most sensitive information? By introducing a machine and technology into this relationship, then it shifts the identity of the teller. In their perception, trust could be replaced with a machine. In their perception, a relationship did not have to include people. And so as you can see, it went beyond them just being terrified of losing a job or of losing certain opportunities in certain conversations with customers. This was a fear of becoming obsolete. And the solution that the bank was offering, which is a very logical solution, backfired because it did not address the deeper problem. Every time the bank said, the machines are accurate and they work faster, what the tellers were hearing is that they are not good enough, is that they don't do a good job. And so what turned the situation around is when the bank executives discovered that they were solving the wrong problem. The breakthrough in this conversation came when one bank changed their entire approach and they stopped selling the benefits of the ATM, the product. They stopped selling the benefits of the product and started selling an identity shift. They started talking to the tellers and telling them, you are not being replaced, you're being elevated. The transactions that the ATM is going to carry out are routine transactions that do not require a lot of expertise. That then frees you to have actual relationship-based transactions, to talk about wealth management, to talk about investing, to solve complex problems that cannot be handled by a machine. They framed the transformation from a clerk to an advisor, and that was more empowering for the tellers. That is what changed the game. That is what drove adoption of ATMs. And the rest, as we know, is history. ATMs are still in existence today, along with many other technologies that have come along, and they coexist with employees in the bank who are there to now solve bigger problems. And so now let's talk about this shift and this transformation within the construction industry, and especially when we're talking about off-site manufactured products. If you are a founder or a CEO in this industry and you want to get your products adopted by contractors, developers, and other people in the industry, then you need to start paying attention to the conversations that you're having and the language that is in your messaging. Because a lot of leaders in this industry are aware of the resistance to change. You are aware and you understand that it's going to take some time for, the craftsmen and the experts and the practitioners to adopt a new material. However, you're not paying attention to what they're saying and what it means behind the scenes. And this reminds me of that image of an iceberg and the things that are above the waterline. And these are the issues that are being raised by the contractors, and the ones that are at the deeper level that you cannot see, that are unspoken, but they're the ones that are actually driving all of the resistance. And so what they might be telling you and what you're hearing is that, it's going to take time for the crews to learn it, or, we're not sure that this is going to work. We're not sure it's going to pass inspections. I'm not sure if this is going to be accepted in the code of where I'm building. It seems a little complicated. We're just going to use, what we're used to using and what has worked for us all this time. All of these are surface level concerns. All of these, if you actually think about it, are issues that can be very easily addressed, especially if we're talking about more convenient solutions that are more accurate. All of these issues that they bring up are easy to address. And that is what you see, and you wonder and you think, why are they so resistant to change? But what is below the surface is actually a fear, a very instinctual fear. And what they are not speaking out loud is, what happens to all of the years of expertise that I have learned if I don't have to measure on site anymore? What happens to my identity as the expert, as the person who solves problems, if all of the problems have been solved in the factory? What happens to the power that I hold as the person who has been in this industry the longest, knows the most people, understands how to work with different materials, if the solution is now coming pre-packaged? In an industry that is still very much controlled by people and relationships, resistance to change isn't always about the material. It's about the shift in power, control, and identity. Factory-made products shift more of the control to engineers, designers, and factory manufacturers. And so now the on-site crews and contractors become more of order takers, or at least that is the perception that they have. And that loss, even when you don't see it as such a huge loss, translates to them as a threat to their survival. And see, the most insidious thing about this fear is that it is an instinctual fear. It's not rational, and therefore you cannot counter it by logic and numbers and specs and all of those things. The kind of fear where your identity and your power is threatened actually lives in your survival brain, and it literally triggers a fight or flight response. And so if you try to counter that with logic and explanations, it actually makes the situation worse. Because every time that you tell them something like, this product is good for you, it's going to prevent 90% of callbacks, what they're hearing is that they have too many callbacks. Anytime you try to say something like, this product is precision cut in the factory, and so it fits every time, what they're hearing is that they're not good enough experts in their field. They don't cut good enough. And with the best intentions, sometimes you will come and say something like, this product is going to make your job easier. But in their minds, they're going, we take pride in our hard work. We've been in this industry for 30 years. Nobody asked for an easier job. These kinds of rational explanations always backfire in the face of fear. And so, what is the right way to address this fear? What is the right way to address resistance that is being driven by a fear of loss of control, loss of power, and loss of identity? Before we go any further, if you're watching this video because your innovative products have not been moving as fast as you expected, if you're encountering a lot of resistance from contractors, developers, and other buyers in the industry who keep telling you the same story and then going back to the materials that they have always used, we need to talk. My name is Angela Maina, and I am a marketing consultant that works primarily with building materials manufacturers. And I work with manufacturers that want to grow their business past $5 million to $10 million annual revenue and beyond. And here's what I know. Your product is not the problem. Your marketing likely isn't the problem either. What you have is a positioning problem. You're positioning your product in a way that is coming through as a threat to your ideal buyers rather than an empowering tool for them to be the master builders that they have always been. And most marketing agencies will sell you more tactics, more ads, more content, more social media, more platforms. But as we have just talked about, logic alone and pushing more specs is not going to solve the problem. It does not address the root cause of why your product is not being purchased and why it's not being adopted. What you need is marketing leadership and a strategy that is going to address the root cause, that is going to address the psychology behind the resistance and craft a way forward in your positioning and in your messaging that is actually going to get past the barriers. And this is what I do. I do not just create marketing campaigns. I architect positioning strategies that help your contractors and other buyers feel more like the experts that they are when they use your products and less like just a cog in the wheel. My clients typically see a 40% to 70% increase in win rates, and not because we created more content or that we were louder or that we talked to more people at the trade convention. No, the reason they see these gains is because we addressed the root cause with a marketing strategy that actually works. And so if you're tired of hearing the same excuses over and over again while contractors continue to buy inferior materials, let me help you. I'll put a link in the description part of this video where you can book a clarity call, and we'll take a look at the parts of your marketing that are actually triggering fear rather than attracting clients to your product. And I'll show you how we can flip that messaging so that it becomes an adoption driver. The link is in the description part of this video, and I hope to talk to you soon. All right, let's talk about how to improve your messaging so that you are driving adoption rather than creating a worse situation for an industry that is already resistant. So number one, we need to be careful to bridge identity and not to replace it. If you're positioning your product as one that replaces traditional methods with better, more efficient results, remember that you're talking to someone that has been in the industry for years, that has spent a lot of time on the skill that you speak of, that has most likely learned that skill from a family member, a mentor, or someone they deeply respect. And so instead of implying that your product is superior regardless of their expertise, you want to reframe that benefit to show that their skill and their expertise is what elevates the result. Your product is the tool that amplifies their craftsmanship and not what makes them obsolete. Number two, if you're positioning your product as precisely measured and cut in the factory, keep in mind what that signals. Control is being redirected away from the job site and to an unknown location. For someone who has spent their entire career owning the work that they produce, owning the measurement, the alignment, the on-the-spot problem solving, your product represents a downgrade, not an upgrade. Their entire career and identity is tied up in having direct control over the end outcome of their work. And that ownership, that pride in their work is part of who they are. And so be careful not to present factory precision as a replacement for their skill. You want to reframe it as a tool to enhance what they do best. Show that their experience and their expertise is what actually ensures that the final product is cut to measure, that the final product is actually accurate and looks good. Fewer errors, faster adjustments, and high quality results. Tie all of that back to the craftsman and not to your product. If you don't reframe that loss of control intentionally, you're never going to get past that barrier. All that we'll keep hearing is that they are replaceable, they're no longer needed, and the minute that they start engaging with your product, that is the end of their career. Last but not least, you need to be aware of the power shift that your product creates. Off-site manufacturing doesn't just change the way things are built. It fundamentally changes who holds power in a construction site. And that's very important. On a traditional construction site, assuming that we're using stick framing, there is an informal power dynamic. And framing contractors specifically hold a lot of power. They are the equivalent of a field general on a traditional construction site. They set the pace. Nothing happens until framing is done. They hold critical knowledge, how to read plans, how to solve problems, how to make adjustments. They create dependencies where every trade waits on them. And they own and control key relationships, often with the decision makers, the general contractor, the developer, etc. And so when off-site manufacturing enters the picture, suddenly that power shifts from the field to the factory. The decisions, the precision, the problem solving, the adjustments, all of that shifts upstream. And if you don't acknowledge and very carefully address this power shift, the adoption of your product is going to be very slow. You're going to keep spinning your wheels and preaching how good your product is and talking about all of the problems that it solves, how convenient it is, but all of that is going to fall on deaf ears. The real issue is that your product has quietly disrupted a long-standing power hierarchy. And when power shifts, resistance follows unless you address it head on. If you look throughout history, innovation has rarely been resisted because the product did not work. It's been resisted because it fundamentally changes who holds power, who has control, and whose identity is at risk. Innovation doesn't fail because people are irrational either. It fails because we keep solving the wrong problem. Contractors don't need more information about your product. They don't need to visit the factory. They don't need to learn more about offsite manufacturing. They need a story about how it makes them more of the experts that they are and not less. And the ATM story has a happy ending, as we all know, even though it took a very long time. The machine that they were afraid of ended up becoming the thing that elevated their careers. Your offsite manufactured building product could have the same effect, but then you have to be very intentional about how you talk to contractors, to developers, and other buyers about it. Stop trying to educate them and start reframing what it means to be a builder in the modern world. That's the only way that you're going to get these people to lower their guard and move closer to listen to the story and to understand your product rather than to perceive it as a threat to their careers and a threat to their existence. That is all for today. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.